Hello, humans. My name is Kate O'Neill. I'm the author of A Future So Bright, which is very bright in the screen there. and I was asked to tell you about the best advice or worst advice I've ever received, but to be honest, I never listen to anything anyone tells me, so I have no idea what advice anyone's ever given me. So that's it.
Kate, how do you not listen to anybody else? How
I
does that
just
happen?
don't.
Like, do you have like earmuffs? Like, what was that on something about Mary? Right? You got earmuffs, so
Yeah.
you just ignore everybody, or how does that
These
happen?
look like headphones, but they're actually not. They're just sound insulators that I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Fantastic. Well, this is going to be a very fun interview as I talk with my hands right now. But that's so interesting, right? So you don't listen to other people's advice. You don't hear what other people say. Like, how has that always been the case? Is that like something in the last 6 months since COVID? I mean, what's going on with that, Kate?
No, I feel like what I want to hear what people say. I listen to people tell me their stories. But if anybody has like one of the things I hate the most is if you're traveling and you say, "Oh, I'm in Paris," and then you get 10 recommendations for where to go and you never asked. I hate unsolicited advice. I hate
Well,
when
let me
people
tell
just
you
like
some
offer
advice
up.
about that, Kate. Here's how to handle unsolicited. Oh wait, no. Okay, so unsolicited advice. No, that's good, right? So
Yeah.
I can totally see that. I can totally see how you might not like unsolicited advice because often it's completely wrong, which is honestly that's why I start my show with this, right? Because a lot of people they get some well-meaning advice that it was great advice for somebody else but not so great for
Right.
them, or it's really crappy advice for them and they share it and it's like, "Oh, wow, that's great advice for me." So, unsolicited though, I think is a good point about feedback that we don't
Yeah.
want unsolicited feedback, right?
Yeah, and and I'm sure that there have been pieces of advice that have been offered to me over time that have been relevant and useful. But I think it's also like when someone asks you who's been the biggest mentor in your life, and I feel like it's a whole like it's a long line of people. I've taken stuff from you. I've taken stuff from everybody that I know and admire, and it's not like there's a discrete moment when they've given me the specific thing that I go like, oh, that's changed my life now. I was just on a podcast a couple weeks ago where the thing was to say like the moment, the defining moment that like changed your life. I'm like, I don't have any idea. There's a million of them and also not one that stands out. So it's just a thing. Like my mind blurs it all together into an interesting little blended smoothie of life.
Kate O'Neill, the smoothie queen. I like this, so that'll be how I introduce you from now on. So no, that's so interesting, right? So as a tech humanist, though, that's got to be super interesting for you because, to your point, I think that everything does blend together, right? Everything is a journey. Everything does happen. But maybe when we look back, sometimes we're able to get some clarity. But your book, right, is all about looking forward,
Right.
which is super cool, right? It's so interesting. You talk about strategic optimism, not just optimism, like, yay, it's going to be a great day, but really being strategic. So explain to us what the heck is strategic optimism and why'd you choose to write about it, Kate?
Well, I think strategic optimism is important to me because I have always seen myself as someone who is, well, first of all, I'm a both and thinker. So I have to back up and explain that one of the things about the talking about the future is the way we talk about it and think about the future is broken. Because every time we talk about the future, it tends to be in these terms of either dystopia or utopia. And we all know that it isn't really going to be like that. And we know for sure that utopia is not even on the table because no one expects everything to go completely right, so much so that we're going to be living in this perfect world. So now we're just talking about shades of dystopia. And I think that that's a really unhealthy and unproductive way to think about the future. So instead, I like to think of it where you are able to if you're able to see the best possible scenario, like if you can survey the entire range of possible things that could happen and recognize what the best of those might be, and then just lean into that while also trying to prevent the bad things from happening. That's what I think of as strategic optimism. You've seen the best possibility. You're laying a plan to get there, and you're not focused on the worst outcomes. You're focused on the best outcomes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so it's almost like the an optimistic way of the old aim for the moon, right? And if you hit the stars, yay, that's way better. But creating
Yeah,
that plan, I think, is where a lot of people miss. They
100%.
optimism, they think, right, it's just, oh, yay, I'm just going to be happy or it's going to be great. But your
Right.
plan, I think, is what makes this different. So, let's start us out here, Kate. How do we start on the path towards making a plan towards the better? Aside from obviously we think about that, right? Like how do we do that? What's some steps?
Well, one of the things is it starts with having a full acknowledgement of the reality of the situation. So I think that's right away where we deviate from this idea of optimism as this kind of like, blinders on sort of folly of the naive. Because yeah, I mean, we're not just going to say like, oh, here are the nice things, here are the good things. We're going to say like, all right, here are all the things. And there's some things going on that are bad, that are destructive, that are harmful, that are posing real risks for real people. Like, if we're talking about things like algorithmic bias and oppression, systems of oppression that are coded into algorithms and machine learning. We have to be very clear eyed and recognize that that stuff is happening. And also, we have to see that there's a potential for us to create the better outcomes of that. We can actually lean those things into a better direction. There's a reason why, data-based algorithms and AI exist, is because we know that there's opportunity, right? We know that we could make more convenient, more interesting kinds of lives with these technologies. And I think all we need to do is lean into creating those better, more interesting lives while also being very aware of the fact that there are people who are genuinely harmed by them when they're built wrong and when they're built without consideration for how the people are suffering as a result of some of these things. So it's
So
starting with that clear-eyed recognition,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So okay, so we have that. So
Mm-hmm.
first, I'm just curious. And let's take a quick sidebar here. Why do people not recognize that there are these inherent biases and these inherent things, right? Things that are possible that may not be great outcomes and still continue to march towards them like nothing is happening, right? Why is that, do you think?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think there's it's related to optimism that doesn't have strategy. It's a kind of insular way of looking at the world where only what's happening to you is really happening in the world,
There you
right?
go.
And so it's a lack of empathy, but it's not like I'm not calling people out on not on being unempathetic or being uncompassionate. I think there's just a way in which life teaches you, if you let it, that other people are actually having lives too, and other people are real as well, and their experiences matter as much as yours do. But I think you have to let life teach you that. And I think that there are people who are in positions of developing technology and building out technology and making kind of big, important decisions that in many cases are technology based, that are affecting an awful lot of people. And they aren't necessarily bringing that perspective that the people who are being affected are real people and that their experiences matter. And so I think if we start from a very, sort of compassionate place of saying we want very much for the people who are suffering to not be suffering, and we also have to accept that maybe the people who are creating these experiences don't mean harm. They aren't being taught to think about other people as if they're real people. So I think there's a kind of, that's where I think that the models and the tools that I'm trying to develop through the work of the Tech Humanist and through A Future So Bright is really trying to move people into a place where they can build relevant and meaningful experiences for people with technology, and amplify that through technology, instead of it being about always having profit at the center of the ambition, or always having growth at the center of the ambition. Those things are ways we measure how successful something has been. It is not the goal of a thing to be profitable. Goal Making profit the goal is like, well, if only the only thing that matters is profit, then probably it's more profitable for me to sell pizzas out my front door than for me to write books and be a keynote speaker. Maybe not. I don't know. Pizzas probably cost a lot to make, and in my tiny little Manhattan kitchen, maybe that's not a very good example. I don't know. You might be able to make pizzas there in Florida for a pretty good profit because you probably have a pretty big
Yeah.
kitchen.
Well, I have a bigger kitchen, and the supply chain is better probably here in
Oh my
Florida,
gosh, the
right? I
supply
mean, that's the
chain.
right. That's the other thing. So we gotta blame the president for that. So no, let's not go there. But I think that's an interesting point when you talk about the lack of empathy and the lack of understanding and the lack of compassion. And I think people do think it's one of two, right? It's very binary. People think it's yes or no. It's
Right.
you're evil or you're not. And to your point, I mean, even dystopia or utopia. I think you made a fun point in the book. You said it's not really dystopia or utopia. Often we suffer from myopia, right?
Yeah.
Which is super cool. So talk to us a little bit more about that, Kate, because I thought that was a super interesting point. Let's go a little deeper there.
Yeah, thanks. I think that the thing is, I used all these metaphors of vision throughout the book, and as people who both you and I don't have perfect vision, we I think we can appreciate, and I assume you are myopic, right? As I am,
Yeah.
and kind of little contact lenses correcting my vision, but yeah, there's all kinds of ways that I think when we talk about the future, we often talk about it in metaphors of vision, and it's like being able to sort of see around corners or being able to anticipate to look ahead to what's coming and the obviously even the brightness of the future. And I think it was interesting to realize that myopia is another metaphor in a sense where we're often not looking far enough ahead. We're not making far enough looking decisions. So the breakdown in that dystopia versus utopia framework is to recognize that we have more agency than what that dichotomy suggests. We are more empowered than what that suggests. And myopia is the other piece of it where when we realize we have agency, when we realize we're empowered that the decisions we make today actually shape the future that we're moving toward, that we have to make less myopic decisions so that when we get to that future, that it's actually better than what it would be had we made, crappier decisions or shorter sighted decisions.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
crappy decision, how not to make crappy decisions was the
Was
subtitle
that the
that I
sub?
was going to go
Yeah.
with. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that got removed on my copy. I'm not sure if that was
Like
intentional
scratched
or
out.
right. Yeah, like yeah, no. So, but truly, to your point, I don't think they're intentionally crappy. A lot of times, we just
Right.
don't even realize that they're there, which is often a challenge. So, as we look at that from many ways, they're just acknowledging it's not binary. There is a possibility out there. There is more future than we realize, and to your point, we have more control than we
Yeah.
think.
We don't often connect the dots very well. And I think that's true across everything. If you read the book, you know that I come back to this theme again and again and again of everything is connected. And I think that everything is connected point is so important right now because we've been through the pandemic. I think we've been learning a lot about, how to think about ourselves as a community in a connected way, like that my health impacts your health and your health impacts my health. That level of connectedness is, I think, important for us to take away from this as a lesson. And I think we're looking at, the climate crisis and understanding the connectedness of decisions that were made or not made 10, 20 years ago and how that's going to play out 10, 20 years from now. And that we can see these long spans of connectedness in the decision making that's happening. We can think about that from the way we're connected through data, that the data that gets collected, about me can shape your experiences and vice versa. And so I think when we just kind of put all these things together and recognize that there's an awful lot of ways in which the life I'm living and the way that I am choosing to live my life is actually affecting you and vice versa, that should give us a lot more, moment to pause and say, like, we should probably be making more clear-eyed choices. We should be making choices that actually set us up, both of us up, and all of us up for better futures.
Yeah, right on. So as we get less myopic, as we get more clear-eyed, to your point here, we do see more possibility, and I would say we should get more hopeful. We should feel like, wow, this is great, right? It might not always turn out the way that we want it to be quite clear, but we have this hope. So let's talk about that hope, because it's interesting. You talk in the book strongly about how work is changing and how this is a great possibility of the hybrid workforce and all of this. So talk to us more about that hybrid model and how that's actually really hopeful for the future.
Yeah, so first I should clarify the way that I think about the role of hope and how, like, even to begin this part of the conversation, I think it's really important to acknowledge that hope is also like optimism. It need not be this thing that is about, ignoring the real possibilities. I think hope is actually a tool that we don't often learn to use as a tool, but hope is usually a guidepost for us. It's telling us what we want. Where our hope is kind of a gauge on what it is we want to have happen. So it's like, making sure that we're in alignment, what we're actually trying to accomplish and what we're working toward, and that our hope is aligned with that. Because if hope is telling us something else, if we actually have a hope that something different is going to happen than what we're working toward, that's a problem. We need to put those things in sync. So when we think about things like, bringing back to the future of the workforce, we have these kind of big existential questions looming about how intelligent automation, and other kinds of emerging technology are going to be changing the reality of the future of human jobs and the human role in the workplace. And I think it's really important that we be very honest and clear about that there are quite a number of jobs. Truck drivers are one job role, and cashiers are another, where we can easily see in the forecast that the numbers are going down in terms of that intelligent automation is very likely impacting those job roles, which doesn't mean that the humans who work in those job roles don't have job opportunities, but we have to be thinking very clearly about how to make sure that there's cross training and reskilling and opportunities for people to move laterally into new positions so that they're taken care of. And we have to think much longer ahead, much farther ahead, and not be myopic, and think too about, the big questions around things like universal basic income. I don't think it is a panacea. I don't think it's the answer that we're looking for. I think we need a whole host of solutions to prepare ourselves for the very real possibility that jobs aren't going to be the mainstay for all of us going into the future. We're going to need to think about a more comprehensive and probably a more collective way to provide for ourselves. And one of the things that I point out in the book, as you saw, Phil, is that I think meaning is this really sort of central human condition. It's the central human characteristic. And what is important to me as we think about the future and the future of jobs and work is that we are all prepared. We're all in a position where we're able to still have meaningful lives, whether we're deriving that meaning from our jobs and from the work we do, the accomplishments we have at work, or not, whether we're just deriving the sense of meaning from, being active parts of communities and families, whether we're, creating these non-jobs style kind of engagements with one another. I mean, I think whatever that looks like as we move into that future, we need to be thinking about how to make sure that we still have a sense of purpose and a sense of what it is we're trying to accomplish in this world.
That's so true. I mean, I was talking this morning with a friend of mine, and we're talking about how sometimes people get so wrapped up in their job as their meaning that sometimes they lose sight of everything else, right? Lack of meaning often can give us that myopic perspective as well. So finding that meaning, how do we find that though? I mean, as in some ways we've lost that sense of community, Kate. I mean, we don't have as many places, if you will, to meet up. How do we make that more intentional? How do we find that more meaning?
I think an awful lot of meaningful connections are made online. I think that we can't dismiss the possibility. I mean, you and I have really become
Yep.
friends through an online community, and we've met in person a few times. But it's nice that this online community was there to connect us initially. So I think it's possible to think about meaningful connections online as well. But yeah, we're seeing an awful lot of complications, right? The divisiveness of politics is making it very hard for people to sort of see across partisan lines within country politics. And then I think globally, we sort of have the extension of that. But I think there's ways that when we think about meaning, we can't just think about meaning in that sense of purpose in terms of how we're what we bring to what we take out of our jobs, we need to think about meaning as what matters. Like that's what on every level when we talk about meaning, if we're thinking about meaning as semantics, like how we communicate with one another, if we're talking about meaning as this sort of middle layer of like purpose or truth or relevance or something like that, or if we're out to the most big picture, macro, existential, and cosmic questions of meaning, like what's it all about and why are we here, we're always still talking about what matters. And one of the things I point out in the book is that when we think about innovation and technology, we're really talking about what is going to matter. And so this is an interesting opportunity for us to look into the future with these two lenses of what matters and what's going to matter. And we can take that approach to every aspect of our lives, from the cities we live in, the communities we live in, and contribute to. The healthcare we're trying to set up around us, the education we're trying to set up around us for younger people, the work environments, and so on. I mean, I think it goes on and on. You can really apply this to just about anything. In fact, I had to cut about 10 different chapter sections or topics from the book. It was just too unwieldy and long, but I think you could really apply this lens to just about everything. Oh, I go into finance in the book and the future of how we'll make money and understand value. I mean, it really is, if you take just about any area in your life that you're interested in exploring in this way, there is a strategic optimist way of looking at it. And I really hope that people will find some value in that.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly did. I think that's super good, right? I think the fact that it's almost universally applicable is very hopeful, and I like that a lot. It gives
Thank
meaning
you.
to a lot of different things, and that is one of the things that I enjoyed most about the book, Kate. It's really good that way. So let's talk before we wrap up here. Let's talk a little bit about trust,
Yeah.
because you talk in the book about trust, and I think trust kind of connects everything that we've talked about together today, right? We've talked about hope, we've talked about empathy, we've talked about meaning and some of these things, and then we talk about technology, which often, the at least, my dad's generation doesn't trust it. Like my dad, if he could, right, he's got a flip phone and that's it. He doesn't trust the tech at all. So let's talk a little bit about trust and how we, for some, we have to actually build it. For others, we have to rebuild it, and how we can use strategic optimism to be better about that.
Yeah, so I think for when we're looking at leaders, business leaders, and people who are building experiences and designing experiences, the opportunity is to understand that trust is something that we do have to earn. We need to create trustworthy experiences. That term trustworthy is kind of telling when we really sort of think of it that way. But I think for individuals too, it's a really interesting moment to think about the technology that surrounds us and how we're learning right now more and more through this the Facebook whistleblower and others who have come forward about just the many ways that social media platforms, particularly Facebook in this example, but others too, have used engagement algorithms to shape our experiences in ways that have further divided us and have built on outrage and created these kind of very hostile and unhealthy contexts for our society. So I think we need to learn. All of us need to learn to approach our digital engagement, our for ourselves and with one another, through a lens of a greater degree of savvy and sophistication. Like we need to be looking at things and trying to question, is this trustworthy, right? Like am I having a trustworthy encounter with this piece of news that's been shared? Like is this a credible source that this comes from? Someone's asking me to play a game or contribute to a meme that asks for very specific questions. Should I be doing this? Like, is this really a wise or savvy use of my time online? Probably no, if it's going to be collecting data that could be used in sort of a Cambridge Analytica type of way to manipulate people. So there's any number of ways in which I think we can be a lot savvier and more sophisticated in how we navigate the online world in particular. But trust, I think, is a thing that we're going to have to work very, very hard to create and recreate around us. We are going to need to try to push through some of the boundaries that have been put up and try to recreate a world where trust is possible.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's a big road ahead of us, but the good news is we have a lot more choice than we thought, right? We can choose, and that's the big idea in your book, Kate, which is fantastic. So,
Thank you.
congratulations on writing A Future So Bright. It is very applicable to our times, whether you're a technology person or not. I think I'm kind of in the middle. I would not, certainly not where you are, Kate, but I certainly know that there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of agency that we can take to create a better future. So if there was one thing, one bit of hope or optimism that you could give folks that they can get started on this path towards a more strategic optimism, what would it be?
I would leave people with the thought that everything is connected and that both and is a really healthy construct. Things are not usually so black or white, and they're not usually this thing or that thing. Like, try to find the truth in the middle ground or in the bothness of that, and recognize the connectedness of all the systems around you. And I think there will be a lot of wisdom and a lot of truth, and we'll be able to rebuild that trust and create that brighter future from that.
Awesome. I love that. Folks, everything is connected. Whether you're in sales, you're leading, or whatever it is you're doing, I really encourage you to get a copy of Kate's book. It's called A Future So Bright. It's on Amazon. It's wherever your favorite books are sold. It's worth the investment, friends. So get a copy of the book and get to know Kate ONeill. If you're on Twitter, check her out at Kate O, real simple, Kateo, real simple. And of course, right, I made it hard, but it's not, right? So figure out the connectivity, understand that both and is a very healthy construct, and find your truth in the middle ground. Kate, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. And folks, go get the book. Go get A Future So Bright. You'll be glad you did. Have a great day.